3,000. Big. 3-1 target, north boom stack, 36,000, 13,000. Bang. 40 scope, short skate, hot, right.
This is the Be One Change One podcast, where our mission is to help listeners define values, practice integrity, and inspire change.
Our vision is to mentor men and empower them to achieve more by taking responsibility for shaping their own lives.
He's CAS, an evolving man who has been shaped by adversity and continues to grow through his imperfections.
And he's Roscoe, an imperfect work in progress that tries to suck less every day.
Between us, we have over 40 years of Air Force fighter pilot experience with countless hours as trainers, instructors, and mentors.
Join us and learn to take responsibility for your own life as we dive into subjects from leadership to resilience to vulnerability.
Be the one who changes their course. Be decisive, driven, and purposeful. Set the example for others. Lead. We wish we'd had this show when we were younger men.
Be the one.
There you go.
Ooh, good job.
Yeah. Well, somebody's got to do it.
Yeah, that's for sure, because it ain't going to be me.
Hey, so there's a disease out there that I wanted to bring awareness to. And it's, I think it afflicts everyone at some point, and it's really hard to shake. And it's called The Last Song I Heard Before I Got Out of the Car disease.
Oh, yeah.
Do you ever get that one?
I do.
God dang. So I've got I Think We're Alone Now by Tiffany stuck in my head.
Gosh.
Yeah. Doesn't seem to be anyone around.
I haven't heard that for a long time.
Yeah, well, I was bumping, man, in my Alpine system in my fucking truck out there.
Oh, no, truck.
In my truck. Yeah, so I was rocking some Tiffany on the way over here.
Right
man.
on,
So
man. I'm proud of you.
I ain't scared. That shit's awesome. And by the way, Green Day has a great cover of that song. If
Oh,
you
did
haven't
they
heard
really?
it,
I think I have heard that one.
It's pretty cool, man. They put a little funky rhythm to it.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome.
Right on.
So cool, dude. What we get into, man?
Well, today we're going to start to talk about emotional intelligence. So,
Ouch.
I know it's. The reason I wanted to talk about this though is because it's a couple of things. One is it kind of dovetails nicely into a bunch of the stuff that we've already talked about on the podcast.
Big O not.
Two, some of the younger guys may not have heard this term, but if you're a professional, or anybody that's been in management or leadership, you've probably heard the term EQ or emotional intelligence at some point in your life. And I think there's a lot of misunderstanding around what exactly it is and what exactly it means.
Well, I'll confess, I hadn't heard about it until a couple months ago when you brought it to my attention.
Yeah. And I had heard about it quite a while ago because Alicia had. But like the first time I was ever somebody tried to expose me to it in a professional setting was when I was a commander.
PG-13 here.
Was when I was a commander. I don't remember, if when Tank was the commander, but he had Brene Brown come in and talk to the commanders about stuff. And we had a couple of commander conferences where we talked about things like emotional intelligence. He had speakers come in and talk about different things. So, so long story short, I just wanted to go over it. One, to kind of dispel any misclaimers about it, and to just give a little more specificity.
Yeah.
And it's also part of that emotional literacy piece that you and I have talked about, trying to expand for folks a little bit. And there's some good delineations in here that I think are important for guys to know, because here's the bottom line, is you don't have to have, especially if you're interested in being in a leadership position or things like that. You don't IQ is not the factor that drives who's going to be the best leader necessarily. You and I have both seen plenty of fucking dudes who were really smart.
Yeah.
Maybe even very talented in the jet, but nobody would have followed them into war for a second or even listened to what they had to say as a commander for the most part, because they were not good leaders.
Yeah.
And that goes back to EQ. It goes back to emotional intelligence, right? Empathy and some different things like that. So I wanted to broach this issue. I don't know if this is going to be a one-parter or a two-parter. I don't know how far we'll get today, but it may be a two-part session because there's a lot to cover here.
Well, we're just going to roll until we get tired of talking. But
yeah,
I was doing a little bit of the homework last night, like we were talking about in the pregame, and that was one of the key things that I took away from it was, you can have guys who are super really good at their job, but that doesn't necessarily translate into leadership skill.
Yeah,
and I think oftentimes people get promoted based on their ability to do a certain thing, a technical aspect of their job, not necessarily their ability to communicate with others or facilitate communication with others. And I know, in the Air Force, I've been saying for a long time, if the Air Force were a business, we'd have been out of business a long time ago, right? By the way we promote people, by the way we manage people and processes, by the way we spend money. I mean, it's fucking ridiculous. We'd have been bankrupt and fired. But, looking at it in a bigger sense, people oftentimes get promoted based on their left-hand, right-hand skills kind of deal. Can you draw really well? Okay, well, we're going to promote you kind of thing. Instead of, hey, man, how does he fit into the team?
Yeah.
Does he facilitate growth in his team, or is he a good follower? Is he a good leader? Is he a good communicator?
Yeah.
Did he take little Sally over to the side and help her through her thing? And, stuff that we've talked about in the past on the show. I think that was one of my big takeaways from it.
Yeah, well, you've seen the movie Office Space, right?
Yeah.
Lumbergh was probably very good at his job.
Yeah.
But nobody wanted to do a fucking thing that he said, right?
Yeah.
Because he didn't communicate well. He didn't have any empathy. He never had an ability to put himself in other people's shoes or to see their perspective on things, right? It was just about metrics and numbers.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the difference here.
Exactly right. And I think we've all probably worked for a guy like that.
Yeah.
And at some level, in some way, we've all probably had it's even tough to put the label of leader on somebody like that because they're really not leading anything. They're in maybe a position of leadership, but they're not leading anybody. To be a leader, you have to have followers.
Yeah.
Just by definition,
but,
right?
Some people try to influence through fear or different, avenues that aren't as productive as maybe support or, empathy or love or, letting the people that work for you know that you actually give a fuck about them.
We'll go back and talk about or listen to the episode where we were talking about the different types of power and authority. You have positional power and the different, there was 5 or 7 types of power and where you can influence someone else based on just your position alone. And I think that I would probably put those people more into a category of management versus leader.
Sure. Regardless, I think, just a baseline. And here's a couple of disclaimers up front. Okay. This is just to expose folks to it. Like you guys, when we talk through this stuff, don't fucking overthink it. Right. If there's something that resonates with you, then go research a little bit. There's a ton of YouTube videos online that have Daniel Goleman, who's the dude that fucking developed this and did all the research and wrote about it, that you can watch online to get maybe more understanding or greater exposure to it. The other disclaimer I want to make is I am not an expert in this field.
Well, today you are.
And at best, I claim to be a diligent student and a very imperfect practitioner of this.
Yeah.
And all of these things are things that have been developed by others. So everything I'm going to talk about today is not an original thought out of my head. It's it's reading his book and then some other stuff that I found online from people that are researchers that have followed up on his research.
Yeah. Well, considering present company, you're the expert.
Okay.
So
I think we'll be fine.
I hope so.
All right, so let's just start with a baseline definition of what emotional intelligence is. And the cleanest one that I found is emotional intelligence is the capacity to be aware of, control, and express one's own emotions and to handle interpersonal relationships judiciously and empathetically.
That feels like we need to break down.
We can break that down right now.
Okay.
So, and we're going to get into this specifically because he talks about there's kind of 4 domains that you have to get into to be good at this. 2 of them are really interpersonal and 2 of them are kind of relational, if you will, or external. So the first thing you have to do is you have to be aware and be able to control and express your own fucking emotions, right?
Yeah.
So guess what? The first domain is going to be self-awareness, right?
Wow,
what we talk about all the time, right?
It seems like we've had this conversation before.
Doesn't it? But then, when you can be aware of your feelings instead of reacting or maybe not having awareness of your feelings that are causing you to have a reaction that you don't intend to have, anger, judgment, fear, whatever those things may be. Yeah. It's also being able to handle interpersonal relationships judiciously. So let's say I'm in a situation where I've got somebody at work who's having an issue. do I walk into the office and just start going bam, 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 bam? Here's all the fucking things that you suck at. If you don't get your shit together, you're out of here. You know, this, that, and the other. Or am I more judicious about that? And I approach it as, hey, what's going on? Like, is there something else going on here? Is there something going on in your personal life? Do you need support? Can we talk about it? Is there, did we not train you properly to do the things that we're asking you to do? Like, maybe I should do a little digging first and see if there's some type of support this person needs before I just go straight after them, right? And that's the empathy piece of it, right? Trying to put ourselves in their shoes, trying to figure out what may be going on for them.
I have a real problem with people that do that sometimes because it often comes across as fake.
Yeah, well,
and you know, in the Air Force, this was my example. In the Air Force, I think that as an enterprise, the Air Force does a very poor job of putting people in positions of leadership, quote, and I'll use air quotes around the word leadership, but just for, you know, discussion's sake, people who are in a position of influence over other people, squadron commanders, DOs, you know, in our community, for example, you get your first real opportunity to be a quote leader is as a flight commander.
Yep.
Which you're really not leading anyone. You're moving pucks around a scheduling board and writing some performance reports. That's really about it. It's not like you're sitting your guys down and telling them about the birds and the bees and how it's going to be. Because, dude, you've only been in the Air Force for like 6 years. Yeah. So shut the fuck up, you know? So by the time you get to a leadership, air quotes, leadership position in the Air Force, you've probably been in somewhere around 16 to 18 years-ish. But you've never really had a chance to hone that craft by coming up through the ranks. And in contrast, I think the Navy Marines maybe do something slightly different to give you some exposure to actually developing some of that skill around a little bit of that. And the reason I brought up that I have a problem when people do that and it comes across as fake is because of these people who have been in the Air Force for 16 to 19 years, and I've known them the entire fucking time, and they've never once done that shit. And then all of a sudden, you're the DO or the squadron commander, and now you give a fuck? Well, dude, what about 3 years ago when I was going through my divorce or my kid got sick or you know, you didn't show a shred of empathy then.
Yeah.
So that's where
and I would say that maybe the Marines or the Navy have a more organized process to teach some of those traits because of how they grow guys up. But I would disagree with you in one respect, because we did learn some of those traits when you're an instructor and you're teaching and you're mentoring.
Yeah, maybe on a micro scale.
When you're an ADO and you're you know, you've got a couple shop chiefs underneath you and you're teaching and you're mentoring. You could apply and practice all the things that we're going to talk about here at any level that you're at. You know, even like we've talked about before, when I was bottom 3 in the 78th Fighter Squadron instead of top 3, you know, we called ourselves the bottom 3, the lieutenants running around. Dude, we looked out for each other, you know, and that was a skill that I learned very early that was very transferable to how I approached other things through the rest of my career. So there's always opportunity, I think, to exercise and to learn some of these things and even to test them out. But I completely agree with you that I don't think if people don't know you, and you haven't gone through the process of building trust with the people that work for you or work around you, your attempts at authenticity can come across that way.
Yeah. No, I've started that show.
You have to build trust first. Yeah. Trust is the first piece of that in any leadership position. If you don't build trust, and sometimes that takes time because like, dude, like I've shared with you, when I got to the 425th, there were not because of me. I mean, there were people that were working for me that had never met me before, but their previous experience with guys like me was a negative, positive.
Yeah.
So I was getting a lot of sideways glances the first couple of months, and it took a couple of repetitions and in some cases, even a couple of very intense conversations for me to show to them that I was on their side. Like I wasn't bullshitting them. Like I was really there to support them and to make sure that they had what they needed to get the job done and to make the squadron successful.
And I've been on the side of that too, where I've been put in positions where I was to lead a team or lead a process or whatever it was, a program, and that program or process or team it's results oriented, it's metrics oriented, right? And you have to deliver. And what you're talking about with the trust and getting the people to buy what you're selling, sometimes that takes time.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I need results now. I need results today. Like you just got put in this position and I need a report by the end of the day, like kind of thing. So there is definitely going to have to be a balance of using my position to get some shit done while simultaneously. And that's why we talk about this being a little bit of a skill and a little bit of an art form kind of thing. And
the important thing about situations like that, I think, Roscoe, is, you know, and especially in the military, it's okay to walk into an office and go, I need this from you by 1500 tomorrow.
Well, because I outrank you. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But if you have to do that before you've built trust with that individual, once that task is complete, it's good to circle back and go,
100% agree. Yeah.
Thank you for getting that done.
Yeah.
Here's why it was so important. You know, I'm sorry that it put you under the crunch, but here's what came down from the top and why I was asking for it. And I didn't have time in the moment to express that to you, but I want you to know that I really am thankful that you were able to get it done and the work that you put into it, or something to that effect.
No, I get it. And that, I think, is where I failed often, was the circle back part of it, because I was just head down, move forward kind of mentality, and didn't really close that loop.
Yeah. You're breaking bigger rocks into smaller rocks.
And you know what, man, the rocks just keep coming. It's not like you get a chance to come up for air sometimes. Yeah. And, you know, it's easy. I think it's easy I know I got lost in, to just smash the rock. Yeah. Just keep smashing the rock. There's going to be another rock tomorrow, and we got to smash that rock.
Yeah. Well, this will be a good conversation about that, because you do have to find some intentionality in that, but it's easy to get lost in things sometimes because it does get busy.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So good on the definition. So
for now.
Okay. We'll get into it. Right. So misunderstandings around emotional intelligence. And we've talked about this before, right? When we talk about sharing your feelings, being vulnerable, we're not talking about just walk around and blabber to everybody what's going on for you, right? That's not what this is about. And it's important to understand, too, that emotional intelligence doesn't just mean walking around and being nice to people. That's not what we're fucking talking about. Sometimes you got to go into a room and go, hey, man, knock it the fuck off.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes you've got to set people straight.
Well, really what you're talking about, though, is communication, right?
It is.
And sometimes it takes a more direct approach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at strategic moments, it may demand not being nice, but rather, for example, bluntly confronting somebody with an uncomfortable but consequential truth that they've been avoiding.
The truth hurts.
Right? Because the truth does hurt.
It stings sometimes, yeah.
But sometimes you've got to expose that, especially as a leader, because if we go back to that trust circle, if we go back to the tree of trust.
Oh, trust tree? We're in the trust tree?
We're in the trust tree. What if they're regular cotton candy? Anyways. If we go back to that thing of trust, though, as a leader, if your people know that you know something that's going on and you refuse to address it, and it's affecting the team's performance or outputs or maybe just, you know, the nature of the team, what's that doing to the trust that you're trying to build?
Well, let's bring this home to a lot of our listeners, and, you know, we can bring this right into our household and how we parent sometimes. Our kids, well, I don't want to throw a blanket over it and try to, you know, point fingers at anyone. I'll use my experience, right? I made it a point to not always tell my kids that they were the best thing since sliced bread. It's not that I went out of my way to knock them down a peg, but dude, if they weren't holding the standard, then they deserve to know that. Otherwise, they don't know that they're not holding the standard. They think that they're doing everything great. And if you never tell anybody that they're messing up or they're not holding the standard, then what would be their motivation for improvement at all, right? And so even in our own households, I think we can take that. Now you take that to work and your teams that you might be leading or managing or whatever, or even being a follower on that. Being a follower, you're going to have to open your aperture a little bit and take some of that constructive feedback.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's where you grow. Now, in the sense that we're maybe talking about it today, especially when we start talking about self-awareness, you're going to have to do this to yourself.
Yes.
And that's sometimes very difficult. And that's where we've hit ad nauseum. We've talked about how you have to be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
Allow yourself some grace, but at the same time, man, you got to call a spade a spade.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, it can come in different forms too, right? So it may be you have to pull somebody aside and be honest with them about their lackluster performance, right? Yeah. And go, you know, hey man, you're just not up to task.
Yeah.
And these are the things that I need you to fix. And it's not a question and answer session. It's, these are the things I need you to fix.
Yeah.
You know? But it can also come in other ways as well, right? And I lost my train of thought for the example that I was going to use.
Sorry, I do that
all of a sudden. But anyways, we'll circle back to it. But it's not just being nice. Second, emotional intelligence doesn't mean you just give free rein to your feelings and let it all hang out like we've talked about before, right? It's more of having the self-awareness to manage your feelings and then express them appropriately and properly.
This is the way I broke it down in my book. I got a chapter in there, talks about emotions and how to recognize and maybe handle that. And I've got great examples of doing this very well, and I've got great examples of doing this very poorly. When you act on impulse and act on emotions, oftentimes it is a reaction to that emotion. And I think that those of us who maybe try to get better at the emotional intelligence piece of it, we try to maybe take a deep breath, count to 3, and have more of a measured response.
Yeah.
Rather than a subjective reaction, we try to have a more of objective response to that. And, we can do it when we get angry. Just take a deep breath, and instead of throwing the wrench across the garage, maybe just set the wrench down, take a deep breath.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm not articulating that very well, but
I think what you're getting at is maybe if you've done some self-awareness, you understand what things may trigger that in you. And so when you see that unfolding in front of you and about to happen, you kind of know, hey, my initial response is going to be to get mad in this situation, but I really need to temper that right now.
Well,
because it's not going to help.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, when we're driving in traffic and somebody cuts you off, or, you go to the grocery store and the price of milk's climbed 15 cents or whatever it is, I drive by the gas station every day and I watch the gas prices and I just get angry when I see it jump. Like the other day, it just jumped 25 cents for no fucking reason.
Yeah.
Right. It makes me mad.
Spring break. That's why it jumped 25%.
What am I going to do? Am I going to start swerving and honking my horn and crashing into the car in front of me? No. Because there's nothing really I can control about that. But anyways.
Yeah. Well, and it can go to a situation too, like, you and I had in the 425th where we had, when I first got there, we had amongst the Air Force cadre, we had some very different opinions on what we could and couldn't do to improve the performance of the guys that we were flying with.
Yeah.
And some guys were very adamant that the stuff that we were wanting to teach, they were incapable of doing, and I remember that discussion becoming very heated from one side of the table. And even though that upset me because I knew it was bullshit and I thought that they were underselling the folks that we were there to teach, me getting angry in that situation and yelling back wasn't going to fix the issue at hand. Right.
Just to unpack that a little bit, I don't think it's fair to say you getting angry was ... You can get angry.
Yeah.
You're going to have the emotion. Like the emotion is what it is.
Yeah.
It's how you
express it.
How you express that.
That's right.
What comes out when you get angry.
Me raising my voice in that situation because I was upset wasn't going to get my point across.
See, that's the response.
Yeah. And so that's what we're getting at here.
You're going to have the emotion. But, listeners, you're going to be sad.
Yeah.
You're going to be scared. You're going to get angry. The shit is going to happen.
Yeah.
And I think one of the key takeaways of the whole show is going to be you have to just see it for what it is and let it go and then respond. Don't just react to it.
That's right. It's response, not reaction.
Exactly.
Right? Yep. So also, one of the things that he dispels in the book is that women aren't necessarily smarter than men when it comes to emotional intelligence. Now, that said, nor are men superior to women. Each of us has personal profiles or strengths and weaknesses in these capacities. I will say in general, most girls when they're younger are taught to be more relational than most boys. So they're, I think, raised to cultivate and to be better in kind of the back and forth of relationships a little better than guys are.
But then you get into that nature versus nurture discussion. And
it is. And so
this is learned behavior a lot of times.
It is. It's very much learned behavior. And that these are all skills that we can learn, like we've talked about in previous podcasts with Alicia and stuff, right? So, but at the same time, you have guys that are highly empathetic, because maybe they were raised by a very empathetic mother. And so they were taught that skill early, but lack some abilities to handle their own distress, while others can be really aware of their own moods, but not very good socially, right? We've talked about that person on this podcast too, right? You may be having a lot of self-awareness, right? But you may not be able to, you may know what's going on for you, but you may still lack an ability to express that in kind of an organized and rational manner.
Well, that's why it's a practice, right?
It's a skill.
Yeah.
And then finally, our level of emotional intelligence isn't fixed genetically, which you were talking about in the pregame, right?
Yeah.
This guy's like, hey, he did a 23andMe, and they're like, hey, do you know that you don't have an empathy gene? It's not a fucking gene, man. This is a skill that can be learned. And it's not only developed in childhood. Unlike IQ, which changes very little after our teen years, emotional intelligence seems to be largely learned and continues to develop as we go through life.
I think that that's a product of maturity and
experience, right? It's very experiential.
Yeah.
Because like everything else we've talked about on here, guys, if you go out and try to practice this, you're going to fuck it up.
Yeah. Well,
but then you take the lesson learned and you figure out how to do it better next time.
And dude, I have not done near the reading that you are, but just as I'm sitting here listening to it, you made the comment, when you go out to practice this, you're going to practice it. Every time you have an emotion, you're practicing this.
That's right.
You're in your subconscious, even you're practicing this.
You're doing it whether you know it or not.
Exactly, whether you know it or not. So I think one of the ideas of the EQ piece of it is let's bring that up and let's recognize this stuff.
It's having awareness.
Go back to the definition and have that awareness and learn how to manage this.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, I've been caught up in this before. I've been caught by it where you're just lashing out or you're having these responses and you don't even realize it until after the fact. The idea here is let's recognize it as it's happening. Yeah. Right. Recognize the emotion that you're having. Oh shit, I'm really scared right now. Or I'm getting really angry right now, or I'm sad or whatever it may be. I only know like 5 emotional words.
It's okay.
So I'm the perfect case study for this shit. But you know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think that's part of the point here. Maybe one of the main points is we need to get to a point where we can see the emotion for what it is real time and then manage that.
Yep. And this is, as opposed to IQ, which is usually pretty fixed for folks as they get older, this is a competence that we can continue to grow and expand, right?
Yeah.
And like you said, it's maturity. So let's talk a little bit about IQ versus EQ, because he goes into this a lot in the book just to give examples between the two of them. So for a very long time anyways, there was a ton of emphasis in schools and admissions tests put on IQ alone. And that would be a direct relation, that would relate directly to how well people would do in professional life, what kind of achievements they would get, right? When IQ test scores are correlated with how well people perform in their careers, the highest estimate of how much difference IQ accounts for is about 25%. That's it. And then a careful analysis thought suggests a more accurate figure may be no higher than 10% and perhaps as low as 4%. So this means that IQ alone at best leaves 75% of job success unexplained, and at worst, 96%. In other words, it doesn't really determine who succeeds and fails, because it's all there's all these other soft skills that go into whether or not you're successful in whatever career field you go into.
I'll use my career field as an example, right? When you get to this level where we're at, the qualifications are there. That's not a question, right? We've all got multiple thousands of hours. We've been instructors for a long time, and we've been doing this for long enough to where the qualifications is just check the containers, right? It's when the boss sticks his nugget out the office and say, hey, does anybody know Roscoe? Yeah, Roscoe's an asshole. Okay, we're not hiring Roscoe. Yeah. That's exactly what we're talking about here. And when I was transitioning from active duty to retirement, I remember talking to this one guy and he says, look, dude, here's just the brass tacks, Roscoe. People hire people they know and people they like. That's it. Because when you get to this level, the qualifications are, they are what they are, right? Unless you're going for like an entry level job where you have to prove that, yes, I have this certificate or something like that. Yeah. That's going to get you in the door. Once you're in the door, every promotion that you get beyond that is going to be based on your reputation.
Yep. And these are all skills that can help you in that.
Yep.
One study they did of Harvard graduates in the field of law, medicine, teaching, and business found that scores on entrance exams, a surrogate for IQ, had 0 or negative correlation with their eventual career success.
I have used 0% of my master's degree ever.
Yeah.
0%.
I'm a political science major, so there we go.
Yeah.
So the next thing, just for some background stuff, is feelings. And one thing that he said that kind of stuck with me is people have to stop thinking of their feelings as irrelevant and messy. and realize that they are in fact differentiated, nuanced patterns of reaction and knowledgeable sources of information.
There's a lot of big words in there.
A lot of big words. So, a lot of times we're taught to ignore our feelings, right? Like, don't just disregard them. Like, don't be scared. Don't have fear. Don't, whatever the case may be. You shouldn't be upset about this.
Yeah.
Whatever, right? But what he's saying is there's patterns to what, like I've learned in my life through self-inspection, the things that I know are going to trigger me, Yeah. I have a very visceral reaction if my integrity is ever questioned, because I try to walk with a lot of integrity. I try to match my actions and my behaviors with my words. If I tell somebody I'm going to do something for them, I fucking do it. Right.
Yeah.
And so there's patterns and reactions that we know. And if you take the time to actually delve into what is it about those specific things that lead me to have this emotion or this reaction to it, then you can start to peel the onion back a little bit and resolve some of that stuff, right? So that when it happens real time, you can go more into that logical side of your brain and go, okay, I know this is a reaction for me. This is a trigger for me. And instead of reacting to it, I'm going to go, hey, I understand what you're saying, but, this is how it's making me feel. And this is why it's making me feel this way. And so maybe we should do X, Y, or Z, or maybe we should move in this direction with whatever the case may be. So that's the first thing he says. The other thing he says is that, and this is me paraphrasing, but we're not logical people that sometimes have feelings. Okay. We're actually people with feelings that sometimes, hopefully, express logic. Right. And so recognize that people who seem to not express emotion aren't necessarily emotionless. This goes back to what you and I were just talking about before. They may just lack the skills to express what they are actually feeling, right?
Well, I mean, we see this in kids.
Yeah.
Our kids don't know. They just
why do
throw a tantrum or
why
cry.
do kids cry?
Yeah, exactly.
Why is that 2-year-old? Why do we call them the terrible
Exactly.
twos? Because they don't know how to say what they're feeling, right?
Yeah.
So they just give you an emotional response to it.
Yeah.
And what you don't want to be is the guy or the gal, at work where every time something doesn't go your way, you're up in arms, you're pissed, you're pouting in the corner, right? These are the things that we're talking about. So getting some awareness around that stuff can actually make you be able to prevent being reactive and then more of a team player, and understanding too, some of that understanding too, especially if you have reactions like that to things people may say, is recognizing that it's probably not pointed at you. It's probably not like a direct personal attack. It maybe just be a side comment, or they might not even be thinking about what they're saying necessarily, right? They might not really be in control of what they're saying or have the empathy or the understanding to know how that's impacting the team around them, because they haven't taken the time to figure those things out for themselves, right? And so that can be part of it too. And so you could be reacting to something for no good reason, right?
Yeah.
You could be going into your own self-pity party, in your own state of depression for something that wasn't even for you, or about you.
A long time ago, we did I think it was a First Name Friday, where we were talking about ways to impress your boss, or ways to get highlighted for the right things, get promoted, that kind of stuff, without asking for a promotion, I think was the direct question that we got. But we talked a lot about this, about, if you're sitting in the morning meeting and the boss doesn't pick you, do you pout, or do you go find the person that he did pick and be like, hey man, how can I help you? Yeah. So that, it's a direct reflection on you and your character in a lot of ways. And this is why I love that big O knot, man, because all this shit ties together. If you're a young person looking to get promoted in your job without going and taking the very direct approach to your boss and asking for a promotion, then these are some of the things that you can do to show him that you're a team player. Yeah. That you're not just, pissy pants over in the corner, that, hey man, I might be disappointed, but I'm not going to outwardly project that. I'm going to go help Sally with the project. Yeah, exactly. And then he talks about the importance of values. Shocker, right? Wow. This is my shocked face. Yeah, right. So what he says in the book is that personal values aren't lofty abstractions, but intimate credos, just like you and I have talked about, right? Our values translate into what has emotional power or resonance for us, whether it's negative or positive, right? That goes back to what I just said for me in integrity. Integrity is one of my overarching big two. Yeah.
And that's why I get really pissed off when I feel like my integrity is being questioned.
Oh, I got spun up the other day over, one of mine is the loyalty piece of it. And I really got spun up over some shit that happened with a person that's very close to our family. And Katie, she kind of bore the brunt of it, but I came real close to losing my shit over it. Now I can do that with Katie because, we share things. We've been together for almost 27 years. I probably wouldn't do that, in maybe a social setting or whatever. But with her, I trust her, and she knows she's seen me at my worst and at my best. But when my values like that are violated, I tend to get a little upset.
Well, and I can give you an example of that. So younger Cass, who didn't know these things about himself, was going cross country with a bro one time from Shaw Air Force Base, South Carolina, and we had a new ops group commander who, shortly after he got there, put the kibosh on all cross countries. But ours had already been approved. So he was begrudgingly allowing us to go do this. And we were flying all the way back to Edwards because the buddy I was flying with, one of his best friends, was taking over the test school. So we were coming out for his change of command. Well, I had done all the mission planning, and my bro Tank had done I don't remember what the form was, but whatever stupid fucking form we had to fill out to go cross country, right? So next thing I know, squadron commander comes in and tells us, hey, we got to go up and talk to the OG. And I'm like, okay. So we go up there, and the OG's pissed. Well, the OG's pissed because Tank made a fucking typo on the form that showed us on one day having over a 12-hour duty day while we were flying. And so he's sitting there railing, and dude, I got pissed because I felt like he was personally attacking my integrity.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget this. I'm sitting next to my commander, who was an awesome dude who took very good care of me. And I started piping up because I was getting mad, and he just kind of put his hand on my arm and basically telling me to shut the fuck up, which I did. Yeah. And then he was very calm and collected and kind of explained the whole thing. Goes, sir, I'm sure it's just a typo.
What Cass meant to say was
Cass did all the mission planning. We'll go back and check the numbers. Can we get back to you in 15 minutes? And we'll let you know, whether or not that this is the actual times or if it was just a mistake on the form. He totally brought the room down. Right.
Yeah.
Whereas in another situation, when I was in a leadership position, not as a commander, but previous to that, I was in a discussion with an ops group commander and started to get some pointed questions around some certain things. And I felt like my integrity was being questioned in a certain process. And rather than reacting and being pissed and going, are you, well, fuck you. Are you challenging my integrity? I was like, well, sir, so are you questioning my integrity in this process? Is there what is it that you think that we're doing that's not up to par? Can you explain that more? Can you give me a little more information? What is it about what's happened that's making you feel that way? That was an appropriate response, because it turns out that as he finally gets into it and goes nitty gritty, it was just a huge, completely miscommunication, misunderstanding on his part, by the way. So
it happens.
Anyways, that's an example of the difference in the two, reaction versus.
But what you demonstrated there was that over time, maturity and maybe a little bit more control of your ego and that
some
bravado,
self-awareness.
You didn't necessarily feel the need to puff up.
Yeah,
you felt like, hey man, I can take a more diplomatic approach to this.
Yeah, it was definitely self-awareness.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyways, he also says that self-awareness serves as an inner barometer gauging whether or not what we are doing is indeed worthwhile. So feelings give us an essential reading, and then if there's a discrepancy between action and value, then you get the uneasiness, right? It's that incongruence that we talk about. And that can show up in the form of guilt or shame, doubts, nagging, second thoughts, like, oh man, I wish I wouldn't have said that, or oh man, I wish, like all the things that we've talked about, right? So
self-deprecation.
All he's talking about is, hey dude, figure out your fucking personal values so that you can actually align your actions, behaviors, and thoughts with them, so that you can actually walk in integrity.
Well,
right?
I mean, if there's a process to this, it is, first of all, do some self-inspection stuff. Second of all, define your personal values. And, nothing new that we haven't talked about already. But there is, I mean, if you had to go step 1, 2, 3 about it, I mean, we're getting pretty darn close.
Yeah, we are. So he talks about there's 4 domains to emotional intelligence. So if you think about like a window that's cut in, 4s with a window pane, on the left side of the window in the 2 blocks, the first one's self-awareness, and then the second one is self-management. So self-awareness is all the stuff that we've talked about, and we'll go into it a little bit more. Self-management, though, is more about emotional self-control, transparency, adaptability, initiative, optimism, things like that. And then on the right side is the relational aspects of it. So social awareness, empathy, organizational awareness, service, and then relationship management, influence, inspirational leadership, how you develop others, catalysts to change, building bonds, conflict management, authenticity, trust, like all those things that we've talked about.
Do you
Teamwork
think
and
that you can
collaboration.
get to all that stuff without first doing the self
No,
stuff?
no, that's
I think
why
you have to start with yourself.
Well,
right?
that's why the first two domains are self-focused, I think. And that's why the first one is self-awareness. Because, dude, if you're not aware of those things for yourself, then how are you going to translate it into your actions and how you show up with the people around you? If you don't know what your own fucking personal values are and you can't practice integrity, then how do you expect the people that you work with to do the same? Or how do you expect them to be able to know that? I mean, if you want to be authentic and build trust, it's really hard to do that if you can't be congruent yourself, right?
Well, I just look at it from an accountability standpoint. If you can't hold yourself accountable, how are you going to be trusted to hold someone else accountable?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, I mean, that's pretty simple, right?
Yep.
Nothing cosmic.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then like the first two, self-awareness and social awareness on the individual and interpersonal side, are the recognition and awareness piece of EQ. And then the self-management and relationship management are the regulation control piece of it, if that makes sense. That's how he breaks it up. And you guys may, if you research this on your own, when he first wrote the book, he broke it up into 5 different things, but it's since been kind of nulled down into these 4. So the first one, self-awareness.
Self-awareness in the process of step 1, 2, 3, self-awareness, self-inspection, however you want to frame that.
Self-inspection is how we refer to it, but it's the same thing.
Same exact stuff. This is the stand in front of the mirror naked for 60 seconds kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's the moral compass stuff that you reference it as, it's knowing what we are feeling and why we're feeling it. And then that becomes the basis of good intuition and decision making. Right. So,
there's a thing here though, where, we talk a lot about what it is, but it's a completely different discussion when we say how to do it.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
Unfortunately, we sound like a freaking broken record here, but this it takes time. It takes a little bit of self-discipline. It takes a little bit of humility, and
it takes practice.
This is what I tell the people that I coach is take off all your clothes and stand in front of the mirror for 60 seconds and really look at yourself.
Yeah.
Really look at yourself. And it's a physical representation. That's all it is. But it's really easy to start picking stuff out on your physical person, on your human body that you can improve on. If you're soft around the midsection, maybe you need to go to the gym, and that's going to lead you down a rabbit hole of, putting together a plan to get a little bit more fit. That's going to help with your mind, body, soul balance. And so, yeah, man, all this stuff is connected in that big old knot.
Yeah. And he kind of breaks it down into 3 different aspects. So he talks about emotional awareness, accurate self-assessment, which is what you were just talking about, and then self-confidence. So since you were just talking about accurate self-assessment, let's start with that one. So it's a candid sense of our personal strengths and limits, a clear vision of where we need to improve, and the ability to learn from experience.
Yeah,
right?
I think it's really easy to do that in a physical, just looking at you're
You're
looking at yourself in a mirror. It's much more difficult to look at, like you said, strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
You might have to bring in some external feedback on this.
If you're a young man, you probably do.
Yeah.
If you don't know what your strengths or weaknesses are, find the people that are close to you that you trust and ask them.
Yeah.
They'll probably tell you, and you may be surprised by some of their answers.
You might be. I mean, I remember when I went to Airman Leadership School and we did that exercise after, like the 3rd week or whatever, we did peer reviews, and I was like, whoa, wait a minute. This is your perception of me for real? Holy crap. I guess I got some work to do. Nobody had ever told me that before.
Yeah.
Because the people that are close to you, your mom's going to love you no matter what. Your wife is probably going to love you no matter what, that kind of stuff. But your peers, the guys who don't have to sleep in the same bed with you at night, they're going to tell you some different stuff.
That's very true.
Yeah.
And then emotional awareness is just the recognition of how our emotions affect our performance, and then the ability to use our values to guide decision making. Right? So again, this is why that values exercise is so important, because let's say, let me think about this for a second. Let's say give me a value, Roscoe. Give me one of yours.
Freedom.
Okay, let's say freedom is an overarching value for you. And what would be something that would affect that would make you feel, and let's say, what would be something that would impact that for you? Like what was something that would give you a negative reaction? Like what's something that could happen that would make you feel like that freedom's being restricted?
Internal or external?
Either.
Internally, let's. I'm just going to keep it in between my own ears. I oversaturate myself with projects.
Okay. So if we go back to your value system, and you have the self-awareness to recognize that, does that align with your value system if you're overtasking yourself with projects?
It would be difficult to. It would be difficult for me to break that down to freedom specifically, because one of my other values is effort, and those almost yin and yang a little bit, because if I oversaturate myself with projects like I think I am right now, then I get caught up in the grind, and I'm up till 11 o'clock every night trying to work this project out, trying to get this stuff down, trying to do what I think is very important today by giving a lot of effort.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that's taken away some of my freedom.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
but also one of your sub values, if I remember right, though, is balance, right?
yes.
Or something along that effect, right? So balance plays into that as well, right? So by understanding your values, you can recognize that maybe I'm not in balance right there. And there's some things that I can actually do instead of getting pissed off about it or feeling like my freedom's being restricted, or right now I have the awareness that, you know what, my freedom's really not being restricted. I'm just slightly out of balance here. And I just need to walk in my value system. If I just make a few of these adjustments here or there, that sense, that emotion, that feeling that I have around freedom will be subdued.
Yeah, no, I get that. And then I look at my other freedom or my other value of effort, and I go, you know what, if I just power through this, it'll be over with in a few days. So it's, I'm just whatever, man.
But that's what he means by emotional
awareness. I'm just
awareness,
a grenade
right?
with the pin pulled right now.
The emotional awareness piece is, if you really understand your values, then when you're starting to have a reaction to something, you can go back to that value system and go, okay, well, based on my values, is there anything that I have out of whack? One, and if there is, then I can make some good decisions about how to fix that. Or, okay, if I'm going to respond to this, how do I want to respond to it within my value system?
Well, okay, so let's go back to that example, and I'll say that here's a little bit of the difference. And this isn't 100%, but I know that it's happening. So I know I've done this to myself, and I know I recognize real time that I'm doing this. And so I'm able to find balance in that, but a little bit of a different way, where I say, you know what, man, I'll just power through this. It'll take me a week. I'll be done. Right. And then in the pregame, we were just talking about, I feel like I've been burning at both ends for about 45 days now. And what did we do this weekend? Katie and I took a pajama weekend, man.
Yeah.
We didn't get too far from our chairs. I logged a lot of hours in my lazy boy just watching movies and chilling. And Monday morning I woke up and I felt energized and I felt great. So I know that I'm doing it to myself. I view the prize at the end as worth it. Yeah.
And so externally, we can go back to my previous example when I felt like my integrity was being challenged as a leader.
Yeah.
My gut reaction would have been like, fuck you, dude. Are you questioning my integrity?
Yeah.
Like, you're a piece of shit anyways. You're the worst fucking ops group commander I've ever had in my life.
Loosen up your Velcro straps, damn it.
You can't. One, you're shitty in the jet, and two, you can't lead for shit. That's how I felt. That would have been my initial reaction.
Vicious personal attacks are open.
But if I go back to my value system, my other value is trust. And part of that trust for me is building trust and loyalty and authenticity.
Communication.
And service. And right, those are and personal accountability. And so there's also a part of me in that process that's going, in the back of my mind, that's going, did I fuck something up accidentally? Because that's that personal accountability piece, right? And so rather than responding and going, well, you're a fucking douchebag and I don't give a shit what you say because you're a shitty commander anyways, it was, okay, hold on a second. What's driving this? Like, I'm not putting this together correctly. I feel like you're questioning my integrity and what we did in this process. And so can you give me a little more information? Can we get a little more on the table and really figure this out? Right. And so that's how I went back to my value system and then was able to show up in my values rather than just reacting to that in a unproductive fashion.
Well, let's just be real. If you're a young dude, you're gonna you're going to try to follow the be one, change one way, and you're going to do some self-inspection, and you're going to go, man, these are the things that I think I need to work on. And okay. And you're going to put those in columns of strengths and weaknesses, or, however you choose to break it up. And then you're going to take out a piece of paper and you're going to start to define some values, and you're going to go from a list of 50 to a list of 10 to a list of 2 or 3. And then you're going to say, yep, these are my values. And the next day you're going to fuck it up. All right. And you might be pissed off at yourself a little bit for not being in alignment with your values. But here's where the debrief process comes in.
That's right.
A couple days ago, we did an episode on personal debrief, and this is where it comes into play, right?
That's right.
You take a look at that. You take a look at that event, whatever it was that caused you to have the reaction to act outside of your values, and you deconstruct that, and you find out why. Why was it? Well, man, he just made me so fucking mad. Okay, this is where we can start to work on the EQ piece of it, right? And go, okay, well, next time I get mad, let me just put the wrench down and count to 3 kind of thing, instead of calling him a motherfucker and tell him, your boots aren't shined.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So, so this is
absolutely.
where all this stuff goes. It all ties together, man. And that debrief process is fucking huge when you get to stuff like this, because you're going to fuck this up. You're going to be young Cass and lash out at that OG. But 10 years later, Cass has debriefed that situation, took out the root cause and the lessons
and has
learned
the
of
self-awareness.
And he's matured, and his ego is deflated a little bit. And all these things work together to get you to a point. Now, what we're doing on the podcast, hopefully what we're doing is we're taking a young guy who's never been exposed to any of this shit before. And instead of being 47 years old and figuring it out, we're hoping you can figure it out at 27.
Yeah, that's right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And then you're going to be much more effective in your role, both personally and professionally.
Well, you're going to take off like a fucking rocket, man,
dude,
because
you're going to be awesome.
Because your bosses are going to love you. The people that you work with are going to love you, and
you're going to build trust.
You're going to start to find what a lot of us define as happiness.
Yes.
I mean,
or fulfillment.
It all works together, man.
Yeah, and that all leads to self-confidence, which is just the courage that comes from certainty about our capabilities, values, and goals. So he talks about goals there too, right?
Oh,
like, dude, that's how you build self-confidence.
We should have this guy on the podcast.
If you know, I'm sure he'd come on. If you know who you are, because you've defined your personal values and you're practicing integrity, even if you don't get it right every time, but you're practicing it, you're trying to walk in that value system, you're going to start to get confident. You're going to be confident around the decisions you make. You're going to be confident around the path that you're on, the choices you make, the goals that you've set for yourself. And then as you start to achieve those goals, you're just going to build more confidence.
That's
and
momentum.
That confidence built, and now we got momentum, right?
Yeah.
And so all of this stuff eventually leads to self-confidence, right?
This is the snowball rolling down the hill, man.
And that's something that I don't know that we talked about before when we talked about self-awareness, but that's some of the stuff that you get from doing this and doing it on an iterative basis. So
I think the self-awareness process is a direct line to self-confidence, because once you know that stuff about yourself, then you can start to make adaptive changes to minimize your weaknesses and enhance your strengths. And it's just, of course there's going to be lines of parallel between those two.
So like we talked about, self-awareness means having a deep understanding of emotions, strengths, weaknesses, needs, and drives. So people with strong self-awareness are not overly critical, but they're not unrealistically hopeful. They're just honest with themselves and with others. Honest about what they can do, honest about what can get done, and then honest about other people and their performance, and not a douchebag or a dick about it, right? Be a good dude, like you like to say.
I think there's value in learning how to communicate with yourself.
Yeah.
Some people are very kind to themselves and pat themselves on the back a lot, or take a softer tone with themselves. I tend to go the opposite direction, and I call myself some very nasty names. And I mean, you go back to episode 0. What's the first fucking words? Yeah. I'm an idiot. And I will call myself.
I believe it was I'm a fucking
idiot. Yeah. And that was just because I flip-flopped the wires in the back of the machine. Imagine what I would call myself if I had done something like really egregious. This is the way I talk to myself. If I can't get the last rep at the gym, or I don't know, last night I ate too many chicken wings. We went to Booty's, and God, Booty's chicken wings, dude. I tell you, I'm a sucker for fucking chicken wings, man. And before you know it, I've eaten too many of them. And they're big, fat chicken wings, too. They're
really?
not like those little burnt up fucking B-dubs wings. These are big, fat. I don't know where they get their chickens, but anyways, I digress. You got me off, I got me off talking about chicken now.
That's okay.
So
I'll bring us back to topic. So, and here's another way that you can, another what I think is a good example of maybe self-awareness and how it can help you on a job. So you may, if you have a high degree of self-awareness, you may recognize not just how your feelings affect you, but affect other people within your team and their performance. So like if you're a person who knows that tight deadlines, like bring out the worst in you, are going to make you stress, are going to make you short with people. You know, maybe sometimes, a lot of times people that end up on tight timelines get flooded very easily and they feel overwhelmed and now they can't work as fast or think as clearly. Then you're going to plan your time carefully to get your work done in advance. Like you're not going to miss opportunity. Yeah. And in the same situation, you're not going to miss opportunity to work ahead in case something gets dropped on you last minute, right?
Yeah.
So that you can have kind of more of a clear plate. So that's where self-awareness can help you. If you know that that's true about yourself, then that's some ways that you can mitigate that, right?
I have a question. And this is,
I don't know if I can answer it, but I'll
well,
try.
this is probably very persnickety and semantics, but is it the feeling or is it the response and reaction to the feeling? You know, you said in your workplace, you know, you have this feeling and then blah, 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 blah. This is like saying the cheeseburger made me fat. No, dude, you ate the cheeseburger. That's what made you made a decision to order and eat the cheeseburger. The cheeseburger is just the cheeseburger.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like me eating the fucking chicken wings last night.
Yeah.
I chose to sit there and eat all those damn chicken wings.
Yeah.
And now I have to pay for it. I can't blame the chicken wings. I don't blame the chicken for making me fat. You know what I'm saying? So is it the feeling that gets you to that point, or is it your reaction to the feeling?
Well, I think it's both. I think it's recognize the feeling and then what your reaction may be to that. And then by understanding what that reaction is, you can come up with some strategies to mitigate that situation from unfolding. And then over time, I think too, as you mature in that process, you can recognize, hey, if this happens, this is how I'm going to feel. Yeah. This is what my reaction typically is. But I maybe I've gone through it enough now that I have the self-confidence to go, but it's not that big of a deal because I've done this before and we can get through this. And I've just got to be very organized about my time now to make sure that I can get all this done. Right. So I think it starts with recognize the feeling and what your reaction typically is to it. And then finding some mitigating ways to mitigate that. But then over time, I think what it actually turns into is the feeling. And then you start to you can change. Yeah. Right.
You change your response to it.
You can control your response to it.
Yeah. That's a better way to say it. It reminds me a lot of the way we used to write the bullets on OPRs or EPRs, and it was action, result, impact. Yeah. You know, you've got this event that happens. Well, how am I going to deal with it? How am I going to respond or react to that? And then what's the ultimate impact of that? You know, and tying all those kind of back together.
Yes. So self-awareness extends to understanding values and goals. So someone who's highly self-aware knows where they're going and why, right? If you have a high level of self-awareness, you understand what your value system is, what your goals are. You're on that path, man. Yeah. You've got it laid out before you. You're charging forward. And an example of that would be like, if you know where you're going, you may be able to be firm in turning down a job offer that's tempting financially, but doesn't fit with your principles or long-term goals. Where somebody else may be like, I can't run away from that kind of money right now. I just
saw this morning, I saw a buddy of mine that posted on Facebook about taking a 30% pay cut because his job didn't align with his goals and his values. He goes, no, dude, I'm going a different direction than what this company is asking me to go. Yeah. And he took a 30% pay cut. Yeah. You know what's going to follow after that though? Happiness.
Yeah. Fulfillment.
Happiness is going to follow with that because he's not going to be conflicted. He may not have as many dollar signs in his account, but he's not going to be conflicted inside of his own head, and he's going to go home happier every day.
Yeah, and he's not going to be at work going, fuck, I wish I wouldn't have done this because now I don't have the time to go to the kids' soccer tournament this weekend or to do X, Y, or Z, whatever it is that fulfillment piece for him, right? So again, that's where it goes back to understanding values and goals. Yeah. And then if you have that path laid out in front of you, it becomes really easy to make good decisions for yourself, which is what we've stressed so much about doing that process.
I wish I could draw a knot. I can't even draw a knot. See, strengths and weaknesses. I suck at drawing, so I'm a stick man kind of guy.
Let me see here. Where am I? Self-aware people know and are comfortable talking about their limitations and strengths, and they often demonstrate a thirst for constructive criticism. Like, how many times have we talked about, dude, if you don't know, get feedback. If you're not getting feedback, go ask for it.
Every single day.
Yep.
Every single day I do an event at the base here, and the last thing I ask before I walk out of the room is, hey, man, anything for me? Yeah, Roscoe, you kind of fucked up this one presentation. Yeah, my bad, man. I misread the piece of paper, or I'm a dumbass. I clicked on the wrong button, or whatever it is. But if you're not actively seeking that I think is a worthwhile exercise for people is, if you're sitting around waiting for feedback, you're probably going to be waiting a long time, because I don't know that a lot of people just go out of their way to go around giving feedback to people.
Yeah, they don't.
If you want it, you got to ask for it.
Yeah, a lot of times you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you're in leadership position, do regular feedback sessions with folks.
Yeah.
Especially if they're part of your leadership team or whatever, right? Because that's important. It's important to give people valid and valuable feedback.
Something I always hated about the way the Air Force framed that, though? The Air Force always framed that as, hey, man, you got to do this midterm feedback on this guy. Okay, great. Why? Well, because at the end of the year, when you write him a really shitty performance report, you don't want him to be able to come back and say, well, you never told me I was fucking up.
Well, the importance.
Instead of framing it like this, hey, man, you need to give this guy feedback. Why? Well, so you can make him better.
Yeah. That's what it's
That's
about.
A completely different, that's
Exactly.
a positive versus a negative, man.
Yeah, well, and recognize too that feedback doesn't have to come in a formal setting either.
No, absolutely
you can give
not.
feedback every day. You can give feedback in very informal settings.
We did it in debriefs every day.
There's plenty of opportunity to provide valid and valuable feedback to
when you're wrapping up the mission objectives, you're giving feedback to people. Hey guys, we kind of sucked it up today, and let's come back tomorrow and try to do it again. Or hey dudes, did a great job. Here's some things that we can improve on. All right, ready to break.
Yeah, and you know what? The good thing about seeking constructive feedback or criticism, if you want to use the criticism term, is if you go to your boss and you're asking for feedback, and then your boss sees you making changes based on the feedback that he's given you because it was valid, what do you think his impression is going to be?
Hold up, this guy's here to play.
Yeah, right? This guy's serious, man, and he's malleable, and he's listening to instruction, and he's trying to get better.
He's trying hard,
versus the guy that thinks all his shit's squared away, even though it isn't, and never seeks feedback. And when he gets it, turns a blind eye or turns his nose up because his ego's so fucking big that he can't believe that he's not good
full
enough.
Of shit.
Yeah.
He don't know what he's talking about.
Yeah. Right. And again, it does depend on who the feedback's coming from, right? So
consider the source.
You got to consider the source, but there's a huge difference between those two individuals, right?
Yeah.
So get the ego out of the way, get some fucking feedback from people, make changes, pivot, adjust, right? Take the lesson learned.
Well, I know I've told you this, and this took me a long time. This is a more mature Roscoe saying this than years ago. But when somebody gives me feedback or some kind of criticism, or if we get a comment on one of our things that we put out there on the different social media platforms or whatever, I do two things. One, I consider the source. Are you some fucking internet troll living in your mom's basement, or are you Katie or Alicia?
Yeah.
All right, because those two are going to carry very different weights. The second question I ask is it true?
Yeah, is it valid?
Because it still may be true. The guy might be an asshole that you don't trust, but it still might be true.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to have a little humility and self-awareness and go, I don't like the guy, and he said it in a completely bad way, but fuck, he's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he talks about, like we talked about before, they also possess self-confidence. So you have a firm grasp of capabilities. You're less likely to set yourself up to fail by overstretching on assignments. Not that you would fail. They know they know when to ask for help. That's a huge one, right? Like, and how many times have we talked about this on the podcast? Dude, if you're in a job and you don't know what the fuck you're supposed to be doing, fucking ask somebody
Humility
for help.
is a superpower.
It is a superpower, right?
This is a trap I think that men get into a lot. And I know people in my close circle, I know people who refuse to ask for help.
Yeah.
Like, dude, you've been out there hoeing your backyard for 3 weeks. Why don't you just ask for some help, man?
Yeah.
I'll come over and we'll crack some beers and I'll bring my hoe over.
Yeah.
Not Katie. I actually have a hoe. It's a device for chopping weeds. But by the way, there was this girl on, this is a total fucking sidebar, but I thought it was funny as shit. This girl on the Surprise Arizona Facebook page the other day, she puts a thing out there and it says, I need to get some yard work done. Any recommendations? and I typed into the comments bar, wear gloves.
Yeah, nice.
And I almost hit send. Instead, I screenshot it and sent it to Katie, and then I deleted it. But
That's funny.
yeah, anyways, sorry.
Yeah, so
I
they
entertain
know
myself.
That's it. It's awesome. They know when to ask for help, and then they risks they take are calculated, and they play to their strengths, right? If you understand what your strengths and weaknesses are, it becomes much easier to play to your strengths.
Yep. Minimize your weaknesses, enhance your strengths.
Yeah, and if you get tasked for something where maybe you have a weakness in that area, then that's where it's a good idea to ask for help, or to go ask somebody who may be better at that than you are, and figure out how they do it.
Hey, we're flying Vipers, and we only got 10 minutes worth of gas. Should we bonsai to the merge and threat react our way into the mez? Probably not.
Yeah, probably not.
Let's hang back a little bit.
Although it is fun. If we kill everybody, then it doesn't matter if we only
Then there
have
is
10
no
minutes
merge,
left.
right? There is no merge. What are you talking about?
All right, so then I'm going to break away from Goleman for a second. And this gal, Tasha Urich, I stole some stuff from her that she wrote about in relationship to emotional intelligence. And she talks about two types of self-awareness, internal and external. Internal represents how clearly we see our own values, passions, aspirations, and how they fit with our environment and impact others. And external is understanding how other people view us in terms of those same factors. So again, she has like the 4 self-awareness archetypes. And I thought that this was be worth, because if you haven't done this process, you might, these descriptors might kind of let you know where you sit. So if we go back to the window diagram, right, with kind of 4 boxes, on the left side, you've got high internal self-awareness and low internal self-awareness. And then on the top, you have low external self-awareness and high external. So if you have high internal self-awareness, but low external self-awareness, she calls that an introspector. So they're clear on who they are, but don't challenge their own views or search for blind spots by getting feedback. This can harm their relationships and limit their success.
That's interesting. Okay.
So low internal self-awareness with low external self-awareness are seekers. They don't yet know, and this may be some of the young guys on the podcast, right?
Yeah, that's probably...
They don't yet know who they are, what they stand for, or how their team see them. As a result, they might feel stuck or frustrated.
That's the guy who's listening to our podcast for the first time going, hey, what's all this self-awareness shit about? Yeah.
You know, they might feel stuck or frustrated with their performance in relationships. If you're high internally aware and high externally self-aware, so you understand how other people view you as well, that's awareness, right? So you know who you are, what you want to accomplish, and seek out and value other people's opinions. This is where leaders begin to fully realize the true benefit of self-awareness. If you're low internally self-aware but high externally self-aware, these are pleasers, and we've seen those folks, right?
Guys, as Cass is talking there, I literally had to write that shit down on a piece of paper so that I could follow along. So maybe hit the rewind button about 2 minutes, and draw this shit out on a piece of paper, and try to make heads or tails of what he's talking about. I know it's tough to visualize, and we're using words that people just don't put these words together every day. You know what I mean? So I have not studied this shit to the level that Cass has, and I would venture to guess that the majority of our audience probably hasn't as well. So
I'm a dork.
I'm sitting in the same room with him, hanging on to some of this shit. So I understand this is fucking deep.
Yeah,
right.
so
some of this stuff is really deep. So if you need to hit the rewind button, jot some of this stuff down, and actually push pause if you have to, and just think about it for a minute.
Because you've probably been in one of these 4 categories. But for the low internal self-awareness, with high external self-awareness, those are pleasers. They can be so focused on appearing a certain way. So these are the people pleasers, right? I want everybody to love me. I want everybody to like me. But they're not really authentic people because they don't have a really great self-awareness of their own.
Is this the guy that rents the Lamborghini for the Photoshop?
Probably. You know, this is all your Instagram influencers.
Yeah. We should go rent an airplane and have our photos taken.
Yeah, we should. That'd be cool. Wait a minute. They can be so focused on appearing a certain way that to others that they could be overlooking what matters to them. And then over time, they tend to make choices that are not in service of their own success and fulfillment. Right? So this is the person who... What happens with pleasers? Yeah, what happens with pleasers is, right, they're so worried about what you think about them or what their external projection is to the world that they don't really, but they don't know who that they are, that they get resentful.
Yeah.
Really quick, right?
Well, they're playing a character.
Well, they are. And none of their actions or their intentions are aligned or congruent with any, because they don't know who they are. They haven't done that exercise.
Oh man, this is like a fucking politician.
Those are just douchebags.
Politicians are going to tell you what they think you want to hear.
Yep, perception is reality.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, sure, I'll promise you all this shit, and I have no intentions of following through on it. But that's what you wanted to hear at the time, and that's what it reminded me of when you were talking about that.
So, as a recap, on the left side, you've got the personal self-awareness, high and low. Mm-hmm. And then on the right side, you've got the external self-awareness, low and high.
Yeah.
So, if you're high internal but low external, that's the introspector.
I like what you said earlier about perception is reality.
Perception is reality.
Well, how do you control that?
By telling people what they want to hear.
Well, but okay,
no, dude, so I worked in politics, and that's the number one rule: is perception is reality. It doesn't really matter what I've done for you; it just matters what you think I've done for you.
Right, but look at it from my point of view. Like, how can I control your perception of me? Well, that's called being authentic, dude.
It is.
It's called walking in your values.
That's right.
And we go back to that whole 1 to 5 analogy and being that influence on other people. People see you and they see what your actions are. They see what you're doing, and that affects their perception of you.
Yeah.
And they're not always going to get it 100% right, probably, because they don't know you maybe at that level, or they don't know what you talk about behind closed doors and so many other factors. But if you are the kind of guy who knows who he is, and you walk confidently, and you act in your values, and you hold yourself accountable, other people see that shit.
Yeah.
And that is their perception of you.
Yeah. That is.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is when you're self-aware and you know your incongruence and you have that self-confidence that we were talking about, even if the perception is false, it doesn't really bother you, because you know over time you're going to win it over. I mean, at least that was always my belief. Like, because guess what? I am authentic. I am going to show up. I am going to find ways to build trust with you. Like 6 months from now, you're going to see I'm not the fucking douchebag you think I am. You know, whatever that misperception that you is about me is false. And I've had that happen so many times in my careers where after the fact, you know, I've had guys come up to me and go, oh, man, I had you wrong. I have.
I don't know if I've ever had that.
I can think about it. I can think about two very distinct things. The DO and the 77th Fighter Squadron, we got over there to swap out with those guys in Iraq. I flew my first sortie, dropped on my first sortie. He was reviewing our tapes. We come back to Shaw, and he's my new squadron commander. And I'm an ADO in the squadron. And great dude. Really good leader. And about 9 months after he took command, he pulled me into his office one day, and he goes, dude, I had you wrong. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, I thought you were just another asshole patch. He goes, I didn't really realize how much you cared about the guys in the squadron and like all the effort that you put into developing guys and trying to make the squadron better. And he goes, and I just want you to know that I just had to tell you I was wrong.
Well, that was because you were being authentic.
Yeah, right. And so, you know,
day in, day out for 9 fucking months.
Yeah, he saw it over time, right? And I had no idea, but which goes back to what we've talked about before, right? You never know who's fucking watching, dude. But they are.
Well, what if you would have asked him
for feedback? People are going to push the test.
What if you would have asked him for feedback early on? He would have given you probably very different feedback than he did there after 9 months.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I don't even remember where we were, but high internal and low external is introspector. High internal and high external is aware. That's where you get that awareness piece. Low internal with low external is the seeker. Don't really know who I am yet, right? Mm-hmm. And then low internal with high external is the pleasers.
This is fucking deep.
All right, dude, that's domain 1. That's all I got.
Well, we've been going for an hour and 12. I mean, we can go for another hour and 12, or we can punt and do another part.
Yeah, I think this might be a good place to stop, actually, because I think we could probably get through. Self-managing is going to be a longer discussion, but we've already talked about empathy, which is really domain 3, and the relational stuff that's domain 4.
Yeah,
it'll wrap up pretty quick with the understanding of the previous 3.
Sweet.
So
if I got to leave people with a takeaway from this particular episode, and there will be another part to this to hopefully tie a bow on it, but man, the self-inspection, self-awareness stuff,
dude, it's critical.
You got to start. You know, you got to start there, and if there is a process of step 1, 2, 3, this is probably step 1.
Yeah,
you know?
And you know what, you guys, you're whatever. You know, fucking listen to us now or listen to us later. You're gonna have to do it at some point in your life if you want to get any better. I mean, I'll just say this is asshole cast coming out, but but I'm going to say it. Young women used to come up to me and be like, "Oh, Cass, what about the Su-30 MKK?" And with the fear in their eyes. And I'd be like, you know what? You're an American fucking fighter pilot. When you hit a merge, you win. And if you don't win, then you probably deserve to die. So fuck you. Yeah. And you know what? We're giving you guys all the opportunity and the skill to learn this shit. And if you don't want to learn it now, fuck you. You're continue to struggle through things. And enjoy all the hurdles that are going to be in your way until you finally fucking succumb to this and figure it out.
Yeah, I have a story that just happened to me recently this week. I'll tell you about it when we go off air. I'll tell you the specifics. But there was a person that I know that was given a tremendous opportunity, would have taken a big leap on his part. It would have caused him to be very uncomfortable and do some things that took him way out of that zone. And he walked away from it. He didn't take that opportunity. So what's the point? Guys, there's a chapter in my book that says your life isn't going to change until you change your life.
Yeah.
You have to make these changes. You have to do stuff. And Cass, you're exactly right, man. It's like your health. You're either going to pay for it now or you're going to pay for it later.
Yeah, dude, I'm not talking on the microphone for an hour and 14 minutes about fucking self-awareness because I want to. Like, I know this shit. I do this stuff. I'm good. Yeah. So, please heed the advice. You'll be better off for it.
Take the old man's advice.
Yeah, please.
All right. So we'll wrap it up there.
Okay.
Part 2 to follow.
Part 2 to follow. That's all I got, man. How about you?
Be the change.
Be the one.
Thanks for flying with the Be One Change One podcast. If you got something out of this show, then be the one and share it in your circles of influence.
You can be our wingman through our website at www.be1change1.com. That's B and the number 1, change and the number 1.com.
We invite you to be the one and join our fighter squadron on social media at Be1Change1 on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. You can follow us at Paul Roscoe White on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, as well as Roscoe's website, www.paulroscoewhite.com.
You can email us from the website and please leave comments, share, and ask questions, or leave ideas of things you would like to discuss on future podcasts. Most importantly, be the one that helps us win the algorithm by leaving a review on whatever platform you're listening on.
Thanks for joining. Until next time, be the one.